Hello my next gen ponies and next gen Xbots. Everyone is wondering, what platform will be better? PS5 or Xbox Series X? Unfortunately, till today, we saw only some fake shit and dry specs on paper. Most of people can't understand all of these data in the right way. That is why I decided to ask a few questions to a developer I know. Unfortunately, he doesn't have access to next-gen dev kits, but he has huge experience. He made his own games in the past, and he was involved in porting large games to small portable consoles. And here is what he said.
Why PS5 tech presentation was considered as boring and failure?
It was presentation prepared for GDC, Games Developers Conference.
Hi, unfortunately we had to cancel the talk that we had planned for GDC, but we do have some super exciting news about PS5, and who better to bring that to you than the one and only Mark Cerny. Without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jim. There will be lots of chances later on this year to look at the PlayStation 5 games. Today, I want to talk a bit about our goals for the PlayStation 5 hardware and how they influenced the development of the console.
So, it was a conference for developers, not for homegrown experts who think they understand shit. Nowadays everyone considers themselves an expert, because they played several games, and they know how to take a screenshot in the game. And, most of people understood only one thing. 12 is bigger number than 10. Everything else Mark Cerny talked about was ignored. Because video was judged by people who have no clue about creation of games and hardware on which games work. These people expected easy answer to the biggest question, which console will be better? And, if this was their expectation, then yes, Sony failed. We still don't have the answer. Which console is better? At this stage, it can't be said that PS5 or new Xbox is a better console. I assume that the better console will be PlayStation 5, because historically, PlayStation has always had better games, talented studios, higher budgets, and a better approach to creating games, especially new IPs.
In your opinion, which console is more powerful?
It is difficult to state clearly, because the parameters are only on paper, and we are not dealing with real games and real hardware. And even after the release of these consoles, it will take a long time before developers become familiar with the hardware architecture enough to draw their power losslessly. So you need to be patient. But it seems to me that everyone has already made the decision, based on their past experience with the products of both companies.
But which console will be stronger?
We have two philosophies here. Xbox represents raw power, PS5 represents optimization and speed.
Xbox tech experts, PS5 is 40% less powerful, and SSD will not save PlayStation 5.
I am sorry to say that, but huge part of the console community, especially on the Xbox side, including their most popular YouTubers, and the vast majority of game reviewers, have no idea about technology, how games work, and what limits them. That's why Microsoft uses TeraFlops to communicate with gamers and media. It is so simple, more TeraFlops means better. You don't need to have any additional knowledge. Truth? Of course not, this is bullshit. First of all these Xbox tech experts don't even know what these teraflops are. Flops is an abbreviation of floating point operations per second. Flops are not an SI unit and cannot be considered as a unit that measures are always the same. For example, meter is always the same, gram again, 1 kilogram weight's the same every time. Teraflops not. and teraflops cannot be considered as a unit of console power, for a simple reason. The number of flops answers the question. How many floating point operations per second can a given processor perform? And this is the answer. Only to this question. Flops has been used since the 1960s, and are no longer a unit that can be used for meaningful comparisons of different hardware. For example, a PC graphics cards. Nvidia GTX 1080 Ti has 11 teraflops. 2016 technology. Nvidia RTX 2080 graphics card from 2018 has 10.1 teraflops. Shocking? No, if you understand that such comparisons do not make sense. How fast you can count to 100 doesn't determine how fast you can run.
Xbox fanboys are telling us that new Xbox is more powerful than PS5.
Yes, that's true in some aspects. Some Xbox components are more powerful, and Xbox love to point that. But they don't like to talk about PS5 advantages. And PS5 has unbelievable fast GPU clock.
In general, I like running the GPU at higher frequency. Let me show you why. Here's two possible configurations for a GPU roughly of the level of the PlayStation 4 Pro. This is a thought experiment. Don't take these configurations too seriously. If you just calculate teraflops, you get the same number. But actually, the performance is noticeably different because teraflops is defined as the computational capability of the vector ALU. That's just one part of the GPU. There are a lot of other units. And those other units all run faster when the GPU frequency is higher. At 33% higher frequency, rasterization goes 33% faster. Processing the command buffer goes that much faster. The L2 and other caches have that much higher bandwidth, and so on.
And super fast SSD, but remember, most important thing, we don't know how all these power will be utilized. We need to know how the whole device will work, how the components perform together.
And dealer said, Mark Cerny is lying about PS5 advantages to hide the weakness of PS5.
I don't know what kind of brain disease you have to suffer to believe someone like D and deny what Mark Cerny says. If you love him and you think I'm a stupid pony, okay then, quick thinking experiment. Imagine you are working Microsoft and you are looking for the person who will be the architect of your new console. You have a two CVs of two candidates on your desk. Mark and D. Let's look at D's CV. What successes does D have on his account? 8,000 subs on YouTube, 3,000 followers on Twitter. Amazing, right? Maybe something else? Probably being always wrong about something related to technical aspects and games. And collecting else doesn't belong to the category of success. Let's check Mark's CV. Mark is the architect of a console that kicked the ass of the richest company in the world. He kicked Phil's ass so hard that Phil had to release 2 more consoles to defeat the original PlayStation 4, forcing their fans to spend $1,300 on useless hardware. Phil was so desperate, he even tried to offer loans just to sell his crap. Moreover, Mark Cerny was an architect of other Sony consoles, and as you know from the past, all these consoles kicked Xbox ass. So this happened multiple times. Scientists say, when you can repeat the result of an experiment, then you have confirmation that this shit is real. Mark is a game development consultant. He helped the best developers in the world, including Insomniac and even Naughty Dog. Mark also worked for Sega. I hope Xbox heard about this company. Mark speaks Japanese fluently. He also created his own games at times. Wendy was a spark in the postman's eye.
And what about the dealer?
The same case as D, a technical illiterate who thinks he understands the process of creating games because he knows which number is bigger and which number is smaller. Dealer is the author of this video.
What's going on, fellas? This Dealer here, back again with another video. Now today I've had an epiphany. I finally figured out why these Sony fanboys are clinging to resolution so much like they are this generation. They're grasping for straws when there are none to grasp for. If there is one straw that it's almost in reach, you know, it's that fucking resolution straw, and it's just come a little fucking closer, but it's not close enough. You're fucked, Sony fanboys. What you need to realize is the PS4 isn't special in any sort of way. Now, besides that, what does it do? What should a console do every generation? It should do something new, exciting, next generation. The PlayStation 4 does not do any of that. It's just a PlayStation 3 with better graphics and worse online. Yes, worse online. You heard that right. A lot of people do not think the online is as good as it is on PS3. You're paying $50 a year for party chat, basically. You're still getting hacked. Your shit's still down every other month. Probably every single fucking month. It's a feature only on PlayStation. Get hacked every month for $50 a year. And here's the thing, people. You've got no fucking games. You've got no games either. That's even worse. You've got cell phone games and shit. I got an iPad, a fucking cell phone. You know, I can play all that shit on my Super Nintendo. But I'm not really into that faggy shit. I buy a console for a AAA. I've said time and time again, 720p with anti-aliasing on it looks pretty much fucking identical to 1080p. And that's simply the facts, people. Any PC gamer that's honest with themselves will tell you this.
I've said time and time again, 720p with anti-aliasing on it looks pretty much fucking identical to 1080p. And that's simply the facts, people. Any PC gamer that's honest with themselves will tell you this.
And the ones that are 900p. You would never see the difference sitting 3 or 4 feet away, especially if you're sitting on your couch, the difference between 900p and 1080p. But now that you don't have any games, it's all about resolution. You're all hypocrites and retards at that. Your mama smoked crack when you were inside. I don't know what else to tell you. There's some reason that you are inherently stupid, and you need to figure that out.
But now that you don't have any games, it's all about resolution. You're all hypocrites and retards at that. You're all hypocrites.
You're all hypocrites.
You're all hypocrites.
Dealer said that Xbox and PS5 specs showing clear 40 or 50 FPS difference between games on PS5 and Xbox Series X.
Of course, what he says isn't nonsense. Do you remember PUBG, 13 frames per second on Xbox One X? Or another example, recently released Resident Evil 3 Remake. Mr. Dealer, did you calculate such results from the Xbox One X technical data?
The highest res, the best frame rate, no compromises.
We can render at 60 hertz. We can render fully uncompressed pixels. These are the highest quality pixels that anybody is seeing.
Dealer has proven many times that he has no idea about game development, graphics, and hardware. But here is the funniest story. In short, Digital Foundry used the wrong photos to compare both versions, and on this comparison the Pro version looked unbelievably bad. Xbox began using this comparison as ammunition in the console war. They were quickly knocked out with this tweet. Certainly, some crying Xbox called Dealer for help. The best description of what happened next will be the Morgana's video fragment, showing how Dealer reacted to this meme.
But of course, this is a console war, and with the Xbox going wild, the PlayStation fanboys have to retaliate. And boy, they did come back with a bang, guns blazing. Look at this masterpiece right here. We have the Xbox One X and the PC version of Time Raider. And right in the middle we have Nathan Drake's handsome face, being ran at the standard vanilla PS4. The Xbox fanboys' ego was so hurt, they had to call for a major backup. So, their so-called Xbox tech expert, from the Xbox fan side, known as Dealer Gaming. I'm just gonna play a clip from the Weapon Will podcast, to let you guys know what went down after he made that tweet.
Who saw that massive exposure of Dealer Gamer on goddamn Twitter?
No, what happened?
What happened? So people was posting up that picture of Tomb Raider and Uncharted. Clearly, Uncharted looks way better. So he made a tweet saying some shit like, "Oh, look at these Sony dudes putting up a picture of like a CGI cutscene to compare to Tomb Raider." I was like, "Nah, fam, ain't no fucking CGI cutscenes in Uncharted." So I showed him another picture that blows Tomb Raider away. He ain't had no comeback for that. He started name calling and all that shit. He started name calling and disappeared. I'm like, "Damn, player, that's all you got?" Like,
they don't have CGI cutscenes in Uncharted.
Yeah, matter of fact, let me get the exact tweet so people can feel this exposure. Let me get the exact fucking tweet. But yeah. So he said, "I love how fanboys are now putting CG Uncharted 4 reveal footage up against real-time in-game Tomb Raider footage from Xbox One X. You frauds." That's what he said. And then I came back with the megaton exposure. Megaton exposure. And I told that boy, I said, "Hey, Dealer Gamer, is this CG too? You stupid fuck. Your dumb ass don't know the difference between CG and in-game graphics." LO, laughing my ass off, exposed. Then he went to some more name calling and he disappeared. He ran. So, yeah, well, showed him that picture of Drake getting out the water when he was scuba diving, which was in-game. Shit blows Tomb Raider away. Nigga ain't had nothing to say. And that was standard PS4 that they showed with the first picture. That wasn't even the Pro. Nigga still was hurt. Oh, God.
What about ultra-fast SSD?
A fantastic thing. It will be one of the fastest, if not the fastest SSD on the market.
Experts say, who cares about this SSD? Few seconds faster loadings, that's all.
This is a very short-sighted statement, resulting from a lack of understanding of how fast this SSD is. Of course, this could be true, but only when the game is badly designed, and developer doesn't use PS5 SSD capabilities in the right way.
What is so special about this SSD? Xbox Series X will have SSD too.
And this is the most beautiful, that Xbox will also have SSD. These are very good news for PS5. Let me explain. Many people don't understand what change this can bring. Some say that SSD will not change anything. In this generation you can use SSD in PS4, and this only gives faster loading times. This doesn't change how games work. PCs also use SSDs, and games look and work very similarly. What will be the difference in the new generation? The main difference will be that both Xbox and PS5 will have SSD as standard. This means that the developer will not have to worry that most users of the hardware have slower old-fashioned hard drives. It will be obvious that all consoles users have SSD on board, and nothing slower, and developers can use the potential of these storage media. This means that the data storage will be used during the game in a way that was not previously possible. Games on PS5 and the new Xbox will use the benefits of SSDs. We have it guaranteed. The difference is that Sony has an ace up its sleeve. First of all, PS5 SSD is 2 times faster. And PS5 and SSD both are designed to work together. Example. If we have ultra-fast car, but there are traffic jams everywhere, the benefits of the speed of this supercar are imperceptible. We can rarely use the maximum speed of this super-fast car. Cerny explained that the PS5 architecture is designed in this way, that there are no bottlenecks. no traffic jams, and the console will have hardware guaranteed ultra-fast access to SSD data. This means that Mark Cerny not only gave us a super fast car, but also ensured that it would move in conditions like on a racetrack.
The reality, though, is that the SSD is just one piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of places where bottlenecks can occur in between the SSD and the game code that uses the data. You can see this on PlayStation 4. If I use an SSD with 10 times the speed of a standard hard drive, I probably see only double the loading speed, if that. For PlayStation 5, our goal was not just that the SSD itself be 100 times faster. It was that game loads and streaming would be 100 times faster. So every single potential bottleneck needed to be addressed. And there are a lot of them. Let's look at check-in and what happens when its overhead gets 100 times larger. Conceptually, check-in is a pretty simple process. Data is loaded into system memory from the hard drive or SSD. It's examined, a few values are tweaked to check it in, and then it's moved to its final location. At the SSD speeds we're talking about, that last part, moving the data, meaning copying it from one location to another, takes roughly an entire next-gen CPU core. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If all the overheads get 100 times larger, that will cripple the frame rate as soon as the player moves and that massive stream of data starts coming off the SSD.
What does this mean in practice? If you think that the game reads data only during the loading screen, you are wrong. Most games read data almost constantly, especially open world games such as Grand Theft Auto or Horizon Zero Dawn. You need to know that console memory and storage device are two different things. Memory is a very fast space which into data from storage device is loaded, and storage device is always slower than memory. That is why we often watch loading screens. A slow data storage device must have time to fill the console's memory with the necessary data. Increasing the speed of the data storage can completely eliminate loading screens and improve the performance of games that read data during the gameplay. Older gamers who remember games on cartridges remember that games without loadings existed. However, due to the high price of cartridges and very low capacity, the games were transferred to cheaper CDs, DVDs, and now, Blu-rays. The problem of data storage speed has already appeared in the PS4 and Xbox One generation. That's why Sony and Microsoft forced full installations of games on the console's hard disks. Mechanical hard drives are not as fast as SSDs, but they are still much faster than Blu-ray discs. So game installations are now mandatory. But how this super fast SSD can affect the in-game performance or make game look better? Developers manage memory in many different ways. I will try to briefly explain to you how it works. I will try to describe the few simplest methods of memory management on the example of a game that takes place inside a large house. The first method of memory management is basically a lack of memory management. The program loads all data into the console's memory. In this case, the whole house. All rooms, events inside the house, everything. Even what the player can skip. All possible scenarios will be loaded. Rooms that player will never visit. Dialogues with characters we will not talk with. Items we will not find. As you can see, this is a wasteful method. A lot of memory is wasted on things that we will never see. And this wasted memory could be used to improve graphics or gameplay.
That means a lot of the 8 gigabytes of system memory is idle. It's just waiting there to be potentially used.
This is an inefficient method because it limits the creators, reduces the quality of graphics and complexity of the game, and also requires frequent loading screens. Currently, such solutions are rarely used. As I mentioned, the method is inefficient, and frequent loading screens piss off gamers. But what if we limit this method, not to the whole house, but only to one room? Imagine console is using full power and full memory just to display one room or other small place, results should be outstanding. And we can find evidence for that.
What is this? Wow, what a mansion!
This is how the first Resident Evil game was made. The game used all console memory for only one room or corridor. Thanks to this, it was possible to achieve exceptionally good graphics for the capabilities of this platform. Unfortunately, the price you had to pay for it was high. During the transition between rooms, we had to watch the long loading screen. The animation of the door opening, this is the way that developer tried to hide these loadings. Now imagine that we have a super fast SSD and data can be loaded so quickly that the transition between rooms will not require watching the loading screen.
On PlayStation 5 though, the SSD is very close to being like more RAM. Typically it's fast enough that when you realize you need a piece of data, you can just load it from the SSD and use it. There's no need to have lots of data parked in system memory waiting to potentially be used.
And developer will still be able to use almost all the console resources just to generate only one room, thereby achieving a much higher quality graphics, greater complexity, etc. That's is one thing. Another method of managing memory is to read data on the fly. So our game loads data continuously. The new data replaces the old one. You can imagine it as a bathtub in which new water is constantly poured, and at the same time the old water is drained, so that the water never spills out of the bathtub. This is how most open world games work. Thanks to this method, Naughty Dog creates such beautiful games. Unfortunately, due to the slow reading of data, this method lost a lot of its efficiency because the data had to be loaded much earlier than necessary. From the gamer point of view, of course.
So system memory has to contain all of the data that could be used in the next 30 seconds or so of gameplay.
For example, if you were approaching the door, the game had to start loading the next rooms and fill the memory with not visible data at this moment, in this case, the second room. But if we had faster access to the data, it will be possible to load only one room in advance, and thanks to this, we will get additional memory to improve the quality of currently viewed graphics. And this is just an example, simplification. Sony SSD will be so fast that the game will be able to replace all the memory content faster than the player's character is able to turn around in the game.
Part of the reason for that 5 GB a second target was to eliminate loads, but also part of the reason for that target was streaming. As in, what if the SSD is so fast that as the player is turning around, it's possible to load textures for everything behind the player in that split second?
Let the quality of textures be another example. I don't know if all gamers know, but high quality textures consume a lot of space in the console's memory. That is why really good high-res textures are rarely used in games. Everyone has seen blurry textures in games. What to do to have high quality textures and saving memory in the same time? The answer is several texture variants of different quality. High quality texture consumes a lot memory. Low quality texture, apposite. The highest quality texture appears on the screen only when the player is close. In contrast, textures away from the player use the low quality. The same applies to the quality of other objects. When we move in the game world, the engine constantly changes the quality of textures and objects. We see better quality when we approach them. Thanks to this, all textures in the highest quality are never stored in the memory in the same time, and thus consume less memory. Replacement of the objects, or textures, shouldn't be visible for the player. This is why the speed is so important. Of course, the speed of changing textures and objects is a result of the overall speed of the console and the data storage device speed. So once again, not only Sony's super fast SSD is very useful here, but also the PS5 architecture that allows extremely efficient data exchange between console memory and SSD. To sum up, it will be easier for developers to replace textures and objects with those of higher quality, but also for quality that has not been used until now due to too slow reading from the data storage device. But we have other possibilities. Have you ever heard of so-called virtual memory? Console or computer, these devices have a limited amount of memory. What if we want to use more memory than we have? You can separate an area on your hard disk that will be treated by the console as real memory. Of course, when using mechanical disks, such memory was very slow. But in the case of a super fast SSD, you can use this solution with much greater efficiency. And what about data compression? That allows you to transfer twice the amount of data at the same time. Xbox Series L can do it too, but to uncompress this data, it must use CPU time. PS5 doesn't have to waste CPU power for this. PS5 has dedicated piece of hardware for this part of the job and can uncompress data without CPU involvement. In other words, PS5 can do this work faster and without any loss of CPU computing power. The size of the games. Games are getting bigger and bigger. Standard is 40 or 50 giga. Red Dead Redemption 2 is over 100 giga. New generation games will be even bigger. What if a super fast SSD can reduce the size of games? Access to data that is stored on a storage device is not instant. The console must find exact data on the disk before its data is loaded into memory. To shorten the search time, the same data was recorded on the disk several times.
The data is duplicated so many times that it no longer fits on the Blu-ray disc.
Thanks to SSD, this will not be necessary.
And what do you think about ray tracing?
What do I think about ray tracing? I think this is a fantastic thing, and in the future it will be a standard.
Most people associate ray tracing with reflections. Can you explain what ray tracing is?
In short, in both the virtual and real world, thanks to the light we can see anything, and more specifically, thanks to the rays of light that reflected off the environment and hit our eye. This is how the image of what we see is created. The concept of ray tracing is to simulate this phenomenon. So ray tracing is designed to calculate the route traveled by light rays as faithfully as possible. The light emitted always travels in a straight line until it encounters an opaque obstacle. Then a shadow is created behind this obstacle because the rays of light cannot penetrate the object. So ray tracing is not only the light and reflection, but also shadows. The great advantage of this technology is that it is very easy to get extremely realistic graphics. The great disadvantage of this technique is that it consumes huge amounts of computing power. The amount of necessary calculations is huge if you want to calculate the route traveled by each ray of light.
Will we play games with ray tracing in 4K at 60 frames per second?
The answer to this question cannot be unequivocal. It all depends on how complex the game is, what the graphic level presents. Ray tracing is not new, and for the first time in computer graphics it was spoken of in 1982. With appropriate reduction in graphics quality, for example PS4 could launch a game with ray tracing. Well, but that's not the point. Ray tracing is supposed to improve graphics quality, and not the other way around. I don't believe that PS5 or Xbox Series L will be able to run more demanding games in native 4K at 60 frames per second, with ray tracing covering the full scene. Although new consoles are powerful, they do not have unlimited power flowing from space. Developers will have to compromise. The first is to limit ray tracing. Ray tracing will work on selected elements of the environment. Ray tracing will not be used for the full scene. Well, unless they are games that are not graphically complicated. Different mixes of resolution, different frame rates, and different levels of ray tracing will be used. And there is nothing to be angry about here. Believe me, developers do cuts at the very end. First, they create the best graphics they can, and then the quality is lowered, so that the game runs in a satisfactory number of frames per second. Do we need ray tracing? Yes, and no. As I mentioned, there is no better, more realistic method of creating light and shadow in games, because this method copies nature. I also mentioned that the technology was invented in the 80s, and until now, nobody has tried to introduce it on a large scale in games. All because this technology requires a huge amount of calculations and is simply unprofitable. Over all these years, developers have learned to create realistic worlds without using this technology. And you have to admit that they are doing great job. The games have dynamic lighting and dynamic shadows. We have reflections in the water and mirrors. The car paint reflects the surroundings. The light can penetrate some objects. Also, even if, in this generation, we do not see full ray tracing but only partial, you can expect even more realistic lighting in games. Will it be 4K to K, 30 or 60 FPS? Doesn't matter. Sony PlayStation Studios will show you how good PS5 is.
Xbit's telling me every day Mark is lying about PS5 because he lied about 8 teraflops and PS4 Pro.
It wasn't a lie. With these 8 teraflops, Mark Cerny is the complete opposite of Phil Spencer. Phil Spencer can put shit on people without deserved punishment. He says the console will have 12 teraflops, and no one questions it. And Phil didn't say anything about console architecture or development on this platform. Also, he doesn't show any proof of Xbox Series L power. The games they showed were running on unknown hardware and look like current generation games at 60 frames per second. But when Epic CEO praises the architecture of Sony console and SSD in PS5, what is the reaction? He must lie. Sony bribed him. Other developers who are positive about PS5 are also bribed. Media bias, and in general, there is an international conspiracy against Xbox. Everyone is lying, and the only honest, and truthful, and transparent man in the industry is Phil Spencer III. And in the reality, Phil's nose could easily reach the bottom of the Marion ditch. When Mark Cerny explains to everyone how the hardware works, presents technical specifications, dozens of details, some people says, no, Mark Cerny is lying. Phil is right. Because he said what we understand. 12 is bigger than 10. Argumentation is not required. Mark Cerny was talking about a feature called RPM. Rapid Packed Math. This allows to half-float operations, FP16, to be executed at the same time that would take for one full float operation, FP32. PlayStation 4 Pro supports this, and Xbox One X doesn't. That's why Xbox are trying to convince everyone rapid packed math is a lie. Because they are afraid their beloved 6 teraflops will lose value. Of course they are wrong. Everyone knows that. Especially graphic cards manufacturers, such as Nvidia and AMD.
It's called rapid packed math. Put simply, this feature was possible because our NCU is so flexible and can handle multiple different data types. This technology was first introduced in its first form in game console leveraging GCN architecture. So there are actually many games that are already looking at this technology for the last year or so. In PC space, this so far has remained exclusive benefits for high-end compute GPUs for machine intelligence and such. With Vega, in keeping with the Vega philosophy I laid out in the beginning, we worked hard to bring this down to the gaming space to enable rich content at an affordable price for everybody, right? So this is kind of doubling of performance. So let's take a look at a very technology demo that uses the rapid pack math. So here we have our TresFX hair demo leveraging the rapid pack math. So what you're seeing on your right is with the shaders leveraging rapid pack math. So they're running double the speed, all the instructions that can leverage the FP16 format. And what it does is that you can have almost double the number of hair strands.
Well, unless it's another conspiracy against Xbox One. Sony, AMD, and Nvidia secretly participate, just to discredit Xbox One X power. There are thousands of tests and benchmarks on the internet. This is not a problem to find them. Of course it is a problem when you don't want to kill your stupid narration. Bots should rethink about one important shit. How it is possible that the most beautiful games in this generation are on PlayStation 4 Pro and not on the most powerful console ever made. Maybe Mark Cerny wasn't lying?
Sony is in panic, system is overheating, and explosion will kill your cat.
I don't expect the development process of any technically advanced device take place without any problems. Maybe they had some problems, maybe don't. I don't know that. Sometimes it takes half a day to build a stupid PC because of unexpected problems. And here, imagine that you need to create a system from scratch that is not only super efficient, but also safe to use, and its failure rate will not exceed 14%. I understand that Xbox may have concerns. After all, they were dealing with the Xbox 360 in the past, which had a 54% failure rate, which is gigantic. And this is the greatest achievement of the Xbox brand. No other console with such failure rate was on the market for such a long time. It seems to me that concerns about the PS5 high failure rate are greatly exaggerated. Sony cannot afford to release such a product. Experience teaches that Sony products are not problematic. My launch PS4 still works without any problems, just like the PS4 Pro and my old PS3. Summary. There are two scenarios in my head. The first, when Sony is not screwing up with system software and development tools, and manages to convince developers not to universalize the game production process and use the additional capabilities of PS5, then PS5 will not only have better games, it will also be more comfortable in everyday use, thanks to immediate system responses. And I think Sony is going in this direction. Let the best example be that Sony worked with Epic, just to be sure that in the future, hundreds of games that will use Unreal Engine 5 will use the capabilities of PS5. Worst scenario, pushed developers with no time will prepare games for all platforms in the same way, and they will not use the additional capabilities of PS5. And this situation has already taken place when the games didn't fully use the Blu-ray discs. So, as you see, the very thing is in the hands of developers again. And as always, we can be sure of one thing: first-party games on PS5 will be stunning.
Internally, it was clear that the presence of a hard drive in every PlayStation 4 was having a positive impact. A lot of things that would simply have been impossible at Blu-ray disc speeds were now possible. At the same time, though, in 2015 and 2016, when we were having these conversations, developers were already banging up against the limits of the hard drive, and a lot of developer time was being spent designing around slow load speeds.
And for us, that starts with our next generation console.
We don't want to build just another console. We truly want it to be transformative.
More immersion, more exploration, more detail.
How do we make it easier for people to get into the game, to stay in the game?
One of the things that gamers and developers are incredibly excited about is reducing load times.
I'm an RPG gamer, and so loading screens are a thing.
You're sitting there in the fake elevator because you know that the game's loading in the background. That's just an elevator ride forever.
That's our goal with gaming, is that you don't have those pauses.
This generation is special because we've really unlocked this new capability to connect with the characters and worlds in a way that no previous generation has allowed.